All right. Welcome, everyone, to Digital Wellness in the Age of AI. We're so excited to have you here with us this morning to talk about this very timely and relevant topic, which I know is probably at the top of a lot of folks' minds. And we are so thrilled to have you here joining us. We know that June is just a really tough time for people to get to do anything that's not directly related to kind of preparing for the end of the school year. So we really appreciate you being here. And we hope to make this a very worthwhile, kind of rich discussion of a lot of different topics related to this area. My name is Laura Sinelli. I'll introduce in just a moment kind of where I'm coming from in the Thriving Minds team broadly. But we just want to call out, this is a really important, or this is a really, I would say, exciting partnership between our organization, Thriving Minds, and two other groups, Media Literacy Now and the Digital Wellness Lab. So you'll hear about all of those in just a moment. But again, we just want to emphasize this is something that we think is so important to cut across lots of different areas: school mental health, school wellness, school leadership, district leadership, people who are working with community members and partners. So this is just such an exciting topic that we want to make sure that you are getting well versed in. So with that, we will move on to some quick overview of the agenda, starting with welcome and introductions of who we all are, our three different groups. Then we're going to lay the groundwork, talking about digital wellness and digital literacy. We'll do some linkage between that and school mental health. We'll introduce a couple of case studies, sharing examples of situations that might come up in your daily practice and how to apply some of the principles that we've been talking about as you approach those situations in day-to-day life. And we'll close out with some frequently asked questions, things that you might be wondering, how does this apply to different scenarios, again, that you might be coming across. I should mention throughout this meeting, please feel free to use the chat. We really encourage any reactions, thoughts, questions, anything that you might have that comes to mind. Please do drop it in there and we'll be monitoring that as we go. That will also be something we'll pull from as we get to that last part with the frequently asked questions. All right, so with that, we will go right into introductions. You can see here our wonderful Thriving Minds team. Thriving Minds, we'll talk, I can introduce in a second, but essentially it's a 3-organization partnership working on supporting school mental health. My name is Laura Sinelli again. I'm at the Rennie Center for Education Research and Policy. I'm joined by Amanda Chung, my colleague from the Rennie Center, and John and Paul. I know you're on the call as well. And Courtney, I'm not sure if you're here, but if you want to say a quick hi and introduce yourselves and your organizations, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Paul from Bright. Courtney, in fact, is not with us today, but I'm blessed to be her teammate. And we are part of the Brookline Center for Community Mental Health, and happy and honored to be here today.
Hi, John Crocker. I'm the Director of School Mental Health and Behavioral Services for Methuen Public Schools, here today representing the Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium, and thrilled to be here and part of the Thriving Minds partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. So Thriving Minds, as I mentioned, is a collaboration between these 3 groups: the BRIGHT program, the Mass School Mental Health Consortium, and my organization, the Rennie Center. We've been running now for about 5 years and have supported individuals in more than 250 districts to help build these comprehensive school mental health systems. So you can see, we don't need to go into all the details, but we've done a lot of different things: professional learning, coaching, professional development sessions, et cetera. And we think this is a really great addition to our set of services that we've been able to share, is partnering with our wonderful partners for today. So with that, I will hand it over to them to introduce themselves and the work that they do.
I'm first on the slide, so I'll kick off. My name's David Bickham. I'm the research director here at the Digital Wellness Lab. Was a research and education and outreach center here at Boston Children's Hospitals, and I'm with my my colleague Hannah. Go ahead, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Chitticle. I'm a clinical research coordinator at the Digital Wellness Lab, and I also run our educational outreach and curriculum development program.
And I'm Tamara Thobel. I'm with Media Literacy Now. We're an advocacy group based in the Boston area, but we work nationally to promote media literacy education. Okay, so and our organization is Media Literacy Now. We're a nonprofit group. Again, we advance media literacy education in the K through 12 schools nationwide through advocacy, coalition building, and policy change. We want to ensure that every student has the skills to evaluate information and use media safely and in a healthy way in a very complex world we're in now, shaped by AI, social media, And these skills we hope can last them their whole lives. Our work to date, we've worked with DESE and the Media Education Lab. We've done a landscape scan and recommendations for improving media literacy policy throughout Massachusetts. We look at policy nationally. We do an annual U.S. media literacy policy and impact report. And we work with state leaders in 23 states right now who are working on the ground to promote media literacy education policy in their states.
And I'll say a little bit about the Digital Wellness Lab at Boston Children's Hospital. We're dedicated to understanding and promoting digital well-being for young people, and we do that by exploring and promoting healthy digital media experiences, primarily for adolescents, but we really study childhood overall. Right now, most of our research topics focus on things like social gaming, AI use, belonging, body image. We use a wide array of methodologies, but all of our reports for what we call our pulse surveys, which are large national samples, are available on our website, which is digitalwellnesslab.org. So you can go and check that out. And so we act as an information resource for the tech industry. We work with them a lot and give them advice on how to make healthier products, as well as the healthcare industry and school communities. So I'm going to kick off today with a quick poll / quiz, 2 questions. And if you want to go ahead and vote, our question from 1 today is, what percentage of adolescents aged 13 to 17 do you feel check their phones at least every 15 minutes? We'll give you all a few seconds to answer before we move on to question number 2. Looks like we've got a big lead in 68%. Looks like I have the ability to end the poll, so I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds. All right. Is this going to tell us? Let's see what happens if this tells us or not. Okay, the correct answer is 47%. Everyone guessed high, which is not surprising. There are outliers and kids that do it much, much more often, but at least every 15 minutes means there are the kids that are checking every 5 minutes or so. So, and I'll talk about some of that. Oops. Not sure how to, someone else can probably move to the next one, right? Let's head to the next question. Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. What percentage of adolescents say social media makes them feel sad or depressed often or always? Excuse me. All right, these are excellent guesses. I'm going to cut you off in just a second. Because I'm giving you a hint. If you haven't selected, this is a little bit of a trick question. The correct answer is 17%, which no one guessed. And it really represents, I think, young people's feelings about a lot of these concerns that we have for them tend to be a little more positive than what we as adults tend to think about how these platforms are impacting them. Happy to answer more questions about that or either one of these as we move on. But keep all these in mind while we talk some more about laying the groundwork and giving you some background information around young kids' media use right now. So go ahead, Laura. I'm not going to be the first person to tell you that adolescents use screen media a lot. These data come from Common Sense Media, who up until about 2022 did a tracked youth over time. And what we see here is that teens in 2021 used about 8.5 hours a day of screen media. So anything with a screen, lower amounts for tweens, but still 5.5 up to age 12. And you see that increase before the 6 years before that, with some interesting demographic differences, with boys using more than girls, Hispanic and Black youth using more than white youth, and lower incomes tending to be using more, spending more time on screens than wealthier families. Along with that heavy amount of use, you're not surprised to hear that over time and as kids age, ownership of their own cell phone has gone up dramatically. As of these data, I'll pull out some, I think, important stats here. It's at about 50% when kids get to be about 12, but it's about 90% when they get to be 19. So when these are 14, so when these kids are going into high school, just about every one of them has a phone. Another interesting, important stat here is if you look at 8-year-olds, 31%, so almost 1 in 3 8-year-olds, own their own phone. And they didn't even ask younger than that. So even younger than that, it's likely that kids are having their own phone. So with all of this, it's not surprising that we're concerned about how much time young people spend on screens. But in actuality, this conceptualization of screen time is actually an outdated metric for our best understanding of what these impacts might be. And for 3 good reasons. One, it's really no longer relevant in an age of constant connection. And this figure here shows that about 46% of young people say they're almost constantly connected to the internet. So in that context, the amount of time starts to become irrelevant because how much time is it if the kids say it's always? Second, it's really, if we're thinking about impacts, it's not amount of time that matters, but really how you spend that time. And finally, these statements about overall time and about overall impact on things like social media assume that those behaviors are always the same for everyone. And in fact, social media is not a homogeneous experience, and different things happen and will lead to different kinds of outcomes, again, depending on what the young people are doing or experiencing. So it's important for us as researchers and me as a researcher not to just measure screen time, but really think about what are the specific uses that might lead to different kinds of outcomes. And so here are some examples. Active or positive interactions on social media, especially with people you already know, is linked to having more connection and more belonging, while cyberbullying or rejection is linked more to social depression and self-harm. And just general consumption, this kind of undirected scrolling, can be linked to things like feeling left out and general feelings of sadness. It's also important to recognize that not all young people are the same. Not all media use is the same, not all young people are the same. Marginalized youth might be able to find their group and have positive outcomes online. Kids that have attention deficit problems are much more likely to have problematic use. And if you have a tendency for social comparison, you're much more likely to have impact related to your body image issues after using social media. With all of this, we need to think about these impacts within specific developmental contexts of young people. And with tweens and teens, a critical aspect of their development is moving away from their family and toward their social circles and peers. And digital media provides them with tools that they are very attracted to use. And that's why we see these stats, like over half of them are using things like Snapchat every day. And really the impact, as I said, is different for different kids. And in fact, we found in our research that 68% of the teenagers we surveyed said they have friends online. These are kids they don't know otherwise, who care about their feelings. But it was also true that youth with the lowest levels of general belonging, like if these are the kids that have the least amount of belonging in their lives, also have the lowest level of belonging online, which means they're not finding compensation online if they're struggling offline. So there's much more for us to learn there. But it's important to recognize that while social media for some kids in some situations may connect them and find social support, it doesn't always work and sometimes can expose them to important online risks. Also, when they're using devices, in some cases, it can make what they're doing offline more difficult or actually displace other behaviors. And that's true for academic behaviors. So studies showing that multitasking with a phone leads to lower concentration and lower levels of academic performance and worse homework performance, and that at least half of the kids in our survey that we did regularly use their phone after 10 p.m. with a small but meaningful percentage using it well into the night, well at 4 a.m., which brings up the issue on the next slide, which is about sleep. And really, media use and sleep is potentially a key driver for a lot of critical outcomes. And some important work is showing that 68% of high schoolers keep a device within their reach at night, with almost a third sleeping with the device actually in their bed. And there's evidence that the relationship between social media use and sleep deprivation is actually what's driving findings around depression. And that's really intriguing because we all know sleep deprivation also is linked to behavior and school performance and all kinds of important outcomes for young people. And while there are medical guidelines out there suggesting that turning off screens before 30 minutes to 60 minutes before bedtime is important, most families don't do this, and our research really shows what's even more important is just focusing on the bedtime and focusing on this is the time you need to go to bed to find the right amount of sleep. So at that point, you need to shut your phone off. So I want to transition a little bit to AI. AI comes in multiple formats. What most people are talking about right now are generative AI, which can create human-like text in an interactive environment with bots that create sort of these human AI interactions. And all of this can have, we're just starting to learn the potential for it to have on young people's development, interaction, and understanding of the world. In our work on AI, we found that really what most young people are using it for is for information gathering. About 2/3 of it do that regularly, but a third do use it regularly to socialize with the AI and express their feelings. And if you look at young people who are using AI every day, about half of them say they have a close relationship with a chatbot, and that same half have real life report real emotional conversations. So there's this potential trajectory from starting to use it for information and then transitioning through increased use to these more personalized types of use of AI. AI can also be used to create deep fakes, which is using AI to create non-consensual intimate images using things like Nudify app, which are much more proportionately impacting females, with 90% of these impacting females. And these obviously having traumatic effects of sharing fake naked pictures of young people on their performance, school performance, and mental health. Okay, so we're going to transition briefly to sort of talking about what is digital wellness, what does it look like, and why does it feel in comparison to problematic use that's going on. So we define digital wellness as a positive state of mental, physical, and a social emotional health pursued through intentional, authentic, and balanced engagement with technology and interactive media. Now, one thing you don't see in this definition is the amount of use. And as you see in the next slide, that use, that's because we have young people, and you will likely see them in your classrooms or your clinics, who are high functioning, but also have high levels of use. And remember, the norm is 8 hours a day. So high use is a very normative behavior. But what we really need to worry about are these young people who cannot disconnect and are really struggling with high use, and that is directly leading to functional impairment because of their excessive use. So this is what we call problematic interactive media use, and it includes the inability to regulate interactive media as it impacts sleep, nutrition, academic performance, social and family life, relationships, and mental health. Kids with, we know after considerable research in our clinic here at the hospital that young people that have underlying mental health and behavioral health problems are at substantially higher risk for experiencing problematic use. Primarily, these include ADHD, social anxiety, autism, and depression. And what we say is if you have a SAD kid, the acronym there, then that means you should be talking to them about their media use. And apart from individual characteristics, there are emotional stressors that can trigger problematic use, including things like parental conflict, shifting social dynamics, or moving. And the school itself is a context in which we need to be thinking about this. And the rest of the talk, through most other folks, will be talking about prevention and intervention type issues. So I'll hand it over to Hannah to talk about what we do at the lab in those terms.
Yeah, thank you, David. Because schools are such a powerful setting in which young people are developing, they are practicing these different skills and starting to move from their family groups into their friends. We can see on the next slide some of the research and findings that we have around phone use, technology, and the ways that young people are interacting, right? So in some of our national pulse surveys, we found that about half of teens say that phones are a distraction in school and that they use their phones a little or way too much. I think another really interesting piece around this is they're also trying to use strategies to manage their own device use. And so schools are a really important space and environment. And we're seeing this with school phone policies, for example, that young people are really starting to learn and think about the ways that technology interacts with some of these other things that they're trying to do in their day-to-day lives. We've also learned that when more teens feel like they belong in school, they also have a stronger sense of support, connection, and community online. And this could be in part because around half of our sample shared that they frequently use digital platforms to interact with friends from offline parts of their lives, such as school. At the same time, in some of our interactions and work with schools, we've seen that teachers report increasing difficulty with attention and social skills in the classroom, and that peer conflicts involve digital components more and more. And so when we really think about how to best address and talk about digital wellness with students, we need to keep in mind where they are on the developmental span, right? So on our next slide, we're noticing that students have different developmental tasks at each stage, which really shape the kinds of risks that they're exposed to and the learning that they need on digital wellness. And so when we've thought about developing our own curriculum and our own educational outreach, this is what we're thinking about at each stage of the game. So for elementary schoolers, we're really thinking about social comparison, their desire for peer acceptance, and their sense of fairness and rule following. And as we transition into middle school, there's more and more of a focus and thought around identity exploration, peer relationships and social status, mood fluctuations, and thinking a little bit more about future consequences and independence. High school tends to be a part of a young person's life where their identities are starting to crystallize. They're thinking about future planning and autonomy. And so when we think about digital wellness in that context in particular, we're really starting to think about how we can set them up for success as they're moving away from the high school context and into the rest of their life. And so we've developed a framework that is a core curriculum that we use when we're talking to young people across the developmental span, along with faculty and parents, where we're really trying to think about digital wellness, but also the digital spaces that they're navigating, these digital life systems. So thinking about the literature and thinking about what's already out there, we're thinking about their awareness, how they're reflecting on their digital media use, giving them agency and the tools to navigate that successfully, and thinking about different equity considerations as a piece of this. So again, I'm going to move quickly here, but that's really the framework that we have for our own initiative, which is part of our Amplify Youth part of our portfolio. And so these are whole community educational workshops for students, school staff, and caregiver. They're really a universal approach to creating a shared language of digital wellness across all parts of a young person's support system. And so we work individually with schools to create these learning opportunities that fit within the community that bring our core curriculum to life. So I've linked to our website here, and you can always feel free to reach out to me if you want more information. But something that we're moving towards is working with more school clinicians. So thinking about nurses, behavioral health, and psychologists. So really trying to build a whole continuum of care of digital wellness across the span and also across the levels of support that a young person gets within the school system.
Okay, I'm just having a little tech issue. Am I on screen and non-muted?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, hi, I'm Tamara again from Media Literacy Now, and I lead the Digital Wellness Project at Media Literacy Now related to health-related media literacy education. You can move slide, please. Our Digital Wellness Project tries to expand the understanding of media literacy education. Some people have a different view of it that does not include some things we wanted to include, but we believe it does include digital wellness, online safety, and health-related media literacy skills. And we want to ensure that health education is also focusing on digital wellness, because we believe that wellness has a new definition in the 21st century, and it includes digital wellness. What is media literacy? Media literacy is a very broad umbrella term. It is about analyzing, evaluating media content, media of all kinds, whether it's traditional print media or digital media. It also means having the skills to create media and interact with media. It also includes safety and digital citizenship online, awareness of mental and physical health implications, both positive and negative, and self-regulation skills, which Digital Wellness Lab also talks a lot about, and awareness of the influence of media content on habits, thoughts, feelings, relationships, and behavior. Media, I won't go into this too much, but media literacy has core concepts and key questions that can be applied to any type of media. So even though we have different technologies that are evolving, the basic concept of media literacy can apply to any media. And I'll just go quickly on the key questions. Who created this message? What creative techniques are used to attract attention, such as advertising techniques? How might different people understand content differently? What values, lifestyles, and points of view are represented or omitted? Why is it being sent? And how does it impact the individual? Oh, we can move on. Okay, so SAMHSA has come out with a really interesting report this year, and it talks about how important it is to start these skills early. The report talks about ed tech use in classrooms, but also about how important media literacy is. And I think sometimes we think, well, we start in middle school when a lot of kids start using a lot of social media, but as we see from the stats earlier in the program, kids are getting their own phones very early. Even before they have their own phones, there's information that kids are using tablets and devices at 0 to 2 years old, in that range. So we really need to start in elementary school, and this report really talks about that. Professional development for educators of all levels on digital wellness, and also emphasizing that health education is a really important place, that we need to start incorporating more of these concepts of digital wellness and self-regulation skills. Can move slide. Just talking about AI, because obviously everybody is talking about AI, we want to emphasize that AI literacy is part of media literacy. So media literacy, again, is a very broad umbrella, and AI literacy is part of that. Also part of health literacy and mental health literacy. And one way we can help youth is, first of all, supporting positive relationships with human beings, which is always a good thing. But supporting media literacy education that includes AI literacy. Not all AI generated content is accurate or objective. Teaches and validates the qualities that make it appealing. So instead of some adults may have fear and a negative attitude towards AI, but we need to embrace it, and we need to talk about what's good about it and what young people see as interesting and good about it, but also the potential harms when you have problematic use. And then also with all media literacy, we're talking about the economic dimensions and motivations of all platforms and tools, including AI. You need to understand what the economic context is for any media that you're taking in. Next slide. So are most students learning these critical thinking skills? Is media literacy rampant? Unfortunately, it's not. We have survey after survey that shows that young people really want media literacy education and digital wellness skills. They know they need some help and they want it. They don't want to be told, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. They want to talk about it. They want their voice to be heard. And they want this in schools as well, as do parents and as do educators. We are working to change health education standards, and we've had a lot of success. We are working on the national level. The National Health Education Standards from Shape America recently have changed now to include digital wellness, and we were working hard with them to do that. The National Consensus for School Health Education is also building their digital wellness content and skills. And in Massachusetts, I was fortunate to be on the committee that helped revamp the health and physical education standards. Came out in 2024. And we also have emphasized a lot of digital wellness and media literacy skills there. So once we have standards, we still need to figure out how to do more professional development, better curriculum, but it's something we're working on at the Digital Wellness Project. Another opportunity for media literacy education is when we are creating the school cell phone policies that are rampant everywhere, we need to not only look at restrictions, but we need to look at education, because problems don't end with the bell. And the crisis, the attention crisis and the distraction crisis in the classroom is an opportunity for learning. So teaching young people the wellness skills, the balance skills that they need to regulate themselves. We believe it's part of the bigger approach, not just restriction, but also education. And that's acknowledged in our state's Attorney General report on guidance for policies for school cell phone policies. So we're glad that they recognize that. And more states are also working towards that across the country. We also believe in a whole school approach. So it's not just in the health education classroom or in one assembly, but really integrating it throughout the school culture. So that means professional development for all staff and educators and staff, all staff. It means engaging parents. It means there might be advisory committees, student advisory committees, student ambassadors, and peer-to-peer learning programs. That is a really exciting prospect. When we look at teens teaching teens good habits and talking to them about media use, it's incredibly effective and engaging. Oftentimes a little bit older teens are talking to a little bit younger, but I get very excited about the future of peer-to-peer digital wellness and media literacy learning. And some schools are doing school-wide theme days, like there's a National Day of Unplugging that you can join in as a classroom or a school, Tech-Free Tuesdays. And again, it's not about saying we should get rid of tech, but these times that you separate from tech give you a really good perspective on your use, your health. So it can be a short amount of unplugging, but it can really benefit young people to see what their habits are and what they do to them and what they want to do in their bigger picture. We can move slide. And just so you know, Media Literacy Now has really great resources for educators and school health professionals on curriculum for digital citizenship and safety, digital wellness, tools for self-regulation, and general media literacy skills applied to health information and informed health decision-making. We create a database where you can search by topic, by grade level, and we hope that this will be beneficial to the teachers out there, to the school health professionals. We have experts review curriculum and professional development, and it is evidence-based, and we try and keep it updated as much as possible. So if you scan that code, that QR code, you can see that we have, you can access that way and through our website. So we're very excited to share those resources. And we also do sometimes a blog spotlight on what's going on in the digital wellness world. We highlighted some innovative educators. There's a California school out in La Jolla that's doing a really interesting comprehensive approach to digital wellness throughout the school. And then we recently did a blog post getting a lot of different opinions on what people think is the most important aspect of digital wellness. So check out our blog and our website if you're interested. And moving along. Okay, so I think that's our section, and we can move along to the next section.
Thanks, Tamara. I appreciate that. I'm going to jump in and give a little bit of context around the school mental health space. And if you could just advance to the next slide. I think the important call out here and the running theme that you're going to hear is that media use is ubiquitous. We are not getting away from this in any way, shape, or form. And in that it is part of every student's life, we need to lean into the realities that incorporating this into our planning, our thinking, our design of systems and services, our assessment of need, our assessment of strengths needs to include considerations around media use. And having an unbalanced view of media and media use is not going to help us. This is both a risk and a protective factor. It is not something that is wholly harmful to kids. It's also not something that's going to be great all the time. We have to look at use, we have to look at the amount and type of use, and we have to realize that the degree to which students are engaged in this could be a protective factor, and it could significantly harm them if they're using it in ways that are unhelpful. So questions arise, but they arise across this entire MTSS triangle, which isn't really a triangle. It's cut off at the top. So that's your helpful spin on a triangle today. You're done with triangles, I know. I want to talk a little bit about how the idea of media use being part of the conversation can inform the design of interventions and assessment and referral and intervention matching. So we'll go into that in a little bit of, we are going to gloss this for sure. I think we could talk about this for hours, but let's talk tier one, these low intensity supports. How can digital wellness knowledge and practices be integrated at tier one? How does it show up? What is the responsibility of schools to integrate media use into discussions about tier one? I think the first and most obvious piece is we have to directly teach about it. We have to inform students about the values and benefits and also the risks associated with media use. And I think that the thing that I kept going back to when I was thinking about these slides is balance. Balanced use feels like the goal for schools and for society. We have to find a way to leverage this great tool and not overuse it. Like any tool, it can be overused or misused. Media use, again, in that it is part of every student's life at this point. Let's teach them how to use it effectively, thoughtfully, and in a way that is not going to harm them. So social emotional learning curriculum, mental health literacy curriculum, great places to include content about media use. I also think that we have to consider the practice-based approaches that we drop into the classroom and realize that if we have a black and white view of media use, then we might actually be limiting potential protective factors in our decisions in the classroom by limiting media use or overemphasizing media use, one or the other. Again, balance is key here. Gray is key here. School-wide initiatives and expectations that really talk about policy and procedure. And I really appreciate, Tamara, that you called out the Comprehensive Health and PD Framework, which is littered with discussion about media literacy and with digital wellness. Also, there's the Digital Literacy and Computer Science Framework. So bottom line, if we agree that this is important information for our kids to navigate this idea of media use, then we should talk about it. This should be something that is made available and cutting across a lot of different content areas. Balance. That's it. This is what we're talking about here. When we balance media use, we foster really excellent outcomes, social engagement, identity development, education. The research is pointing to these skills, these outcomes emerging from balanced and thoughtful media use. And yes, if you overuse media, isolation, inactivity, self-diagnosis, privacy concerns, social skills regression is on my mind in a huge way. These are the outcomes of use in a way that is not balanced. So we've got to teach the balance to our kids. They don't simply understand and know inherently, innately, how to use media thoughtfully and effectively. The idea of problematic media use is something that I think is going to come up a lot when we think about tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. And it is not a currently recognized mental disorder. So this is a frame that is drawing upon the idea of gambling and substance use frameworks. And I think that these are the elements that I would be most concerned about when I'm thinking about overuse, misuse, or markers for the need for intervention, preoccupation, withdrawal, failed control, loss of interest. So I think it's important that we have in our toolbox ways of understanding media use that align with this frame so that we can identify students in a more proactive and preventative manner and provide them instruction and intervention early and disrupt potentially harmful media use. If we have an idea of functioning, impact on functioning being a marker of potential media misuse, then I think that will allow for us to identify students in a more proactive fashion. We do have great interventions that we know work for the presenting problems in schools. My ask here is that we consider the variable of problematic media use in our discussions about what students need for intervention so that we can incorporate that into the discussion. In the same way that I would say an intervention plan that doesn't account for potential trauma is an intervention plan that is simply not comprehensive. An intervention plan that doesn't account for problematic media use is potentially a intervention plan that is not comprehensive. We have to incorporate this into our discussions. Moving right along, when to intervene, again, impact on functioning. What kind of functioning? Social, interpersonal, occupational, educational, personal, adaptive functioning. This is coming right out of the DSM, right? These are the areas that we want to intervene on behalf of when life functioning is impacted as a function of use of substances, gambling, media use. Yes, we want to intervene on behalf of those situations so that students can function more effectively. I'm going to pass the mic for just a moment to talk about digital wellness in the context of MTSS as it relates to culture and community. I think we can go to the next slide. Yes, infrastructure and data. So I look to my colleague, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, John. We'll just be quick, just to note that when we think about the MTSS framework, we're always just wanting to reinforce that tiered interventions are certainly at the heart of it, and they're what we're trying to get to kids and families, but they only happen when adults are well organized. And that has to do with infrastructure and data. And so these are just some examples of data that is collected, and then it raises this very interesting challenge, right? Which is I think it's the very rare school that at this point has a way in to look directly at problematic media use. So, we do mental health screening. Many schools do, a growing number of schools does, but that's not explicitly including screening for problematic media use. So that's a consideration to take into account, right? Are there ways where we can begin to explicitly screen? And then, can we begin to build data at the whole school level that really lets us know what's happening with kids, both in aggregate trends as well as helps us identify individual kids or groups of kids that may be really struggling and with whom we want to intervene. So just to note, we have a data gap right now, I think, within schools around social media, and digital media. So if we advance, and then, secondly, just think we're always thinking that all work that's happening in schools, interventions, teams, people, use of data, it's always happening in this broader context of the school culture and the wider community. And that, a second place that as we move this work forward, we want to be thinking about are these like sort of higher level pieces. So, these are some examples of policies and practices, setting norms and just, being explicit. So there's both this question of what are we doing in terms of specific programming, specific supports and interventions, but then also what are we trying to accomplish at the level of wider school culture, and community as we really try to think this fully into the picture of our schools. So that is, I think what we have, right? I think, I'm going to turn it back to Amanda and Laura to get us to then think, what does this look like in a little bit of an applied way?
Sorry, Amanda just sent me a message that her Wi-Fi went out, so I will take this part on instead. So we wanted to give you a chance to reflect a bit on what does this look like in practice. So these situations are probably ones that are, if not something that's actually happened to you, certainly something you can imagine happening. So we wanted to just read through it and then give you a chance to think through how would you kind of respond to this situation. Please, again, feel free to drop into the chat, but then I am going to open it up to any of our speakers from today to share how they would respond or some of the considerations they would think through. So you are having a casual conversation with a 10th grade student you know well. She tells you she's been spending several hours a day talking with an AI chatbot. Last night, she didn't get to sleep until after midnight because of getting so caught up in the conversation. She mentioned how nice it is to have someone to turn to who will always listen and hear her out because she's been having some trouble with her friend group recently. So there's two pieces here. One, how would you think about responding in the moment to this casual conversation? What are some of the things you would bring up or pieces you would point to? And then two, what are any follow-up actions you would take? So again, I encourage reactions in the chat, but I would like to open up for any of our speakers to share how would you think about a situation like this? What are some of the pieces you think are most important to call out?
All right, I'm going to jump in. This has come up a lot in the discussion of onboarding AI into the realm of school mental health. I really am worried about this inauthentic connection that's being created and the lack of authentic support that is seemingly being secured. This is a person that thinks they're being supported authentically. They're not. And when push comes to shove and this person needs help, will they have the ability to actually access authentic support that can translate to something meaningful? I worry about that.
Yeah, and then just calling out the comment in the chat about an adult in the school you feel is your person you can talk to. So kind of a direct response being, who do you feel like you can go to seek some resources and support in the immediate future?
It's interesting, right? Because I also think in the moment there probably needs to be some kind of validation. Like I think I don't think we can afford to like start by telling the student that what they're doing isn't good for them, right? It's and so then the question of like how to like enter that conversation with curiosity, um, and not to communicate judgment in the moment just feels like really important. And potentially like John, as you're saying, like when your antennas are totally, like up and, kind of like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good time, as Ryan said in the chat too, about following up about the sleep. I think that, that's a little bit of a less of a hot button topic to sort of say, oh, well, this is a time when we know the immediate consequences of sleep, and you're probably not feeling great today if you stayed up that late. And so maybe we can think about ways to, one, make sure your needs are being met in other places, and two, set up a nice routine for you so you don't have this time when it looks like you used it probably longer than you meant to. And what kind of tools could we use so that you can break out of that and make sure you're getting enough sleep.
Great. We are going to move on then to case study number 2. But again, please feel free to continue to share thoughts. So for this one, you have a group of 7th grade boys in your school. They've recently gotten into using a new AI-based app that allows them to generate altered photos of their classmates and comment on the results. Teachers have been complaining that they need to spend substantial time enforcing the school's cell phone policy to make sure that the students keep their phones away during classes, while other students are feeling that are reporting that they feel targeted by the pictures and the comments being shared. So again, what are some immediate steps school staff should consider? And then what are some longer term policies or practices that can help kind of address this proactively before it becomes an issue again? I welcome thoughts, comments, reflections in the chat. And then if any of our speakers wanted to share any other thoughts, feel free to come off mute and jump in.
Well, Bethany, I'm appreciating your comment in the chat on broad education on safety and laws associated with sharing. I'm reading here some deep fakes potentially being shared. It doesn't say that directly, but are we headed in that direction? I don't know.
Can I just also make a point? When we talk about digital citizenship, we also talk about digital empathy. So I think the word empathy is something we use in social emotional learning, but we also use it in teaching media literacy and digital citizenship and digital wellness. So a good teaching moment to talk about how would you feel? How do people feel when XYZ is shared, XYZ happens, this image is shared? Just pointing out that digital empathy is a thing and it needs to be part of our digital wellness, digital citizenship curriculum.
I just want to note that there's a potential overlap with bullying here, and the question of, I think, the bullying statute, I think folks need to be aware of in this kind of instance, and just thinking that, sort of into the picture as well. I mean, it's really complex.
I'm also seeing in the chat basically some things that are on the side of policy. So stricter policies on cell phone use, change in practices around where phones are kept and stored during classes to get around that time spent with enforcement mechanisms. Do you want to leave it open if there's any last thoughts on this? But then I have a follow-up question on the cell phone policy piece that we'll get to when we get to our last FAQs part. Any other thoughts here before we move on?
I mean, I think it's important to pull out. We talked about throughout today about sort of tech is about this balance, about the positive for connection and the risk factors, and this is just a strong example of a negative side of it. And I think that can be a learning moment for these young people to bring in this idea of empathy, which is such a strong suggestion, and then to sort of talk about, there are things tech can do that connect, and this is something it is designed to do something that is more or less harmful in the way that it's being used. And I think that those approaches, rather than kind of broad bands or broad strokes, are going to be more effective, especially for kids of this age.
Great. Well, thank you all. I know we don't have a ton of time to get into too many questions, but I know just on the following up on the piece around policy, I'm curious to hear, because this is something that I know, at least in Massachusetts, is a big topic of debate. The legislature is debating right now whether they want to put in place a law that would require all districts to impose a bell-to-bell cell phone ban for next year. Whether or not that goes through, a lot of districts are choosing to do that. So I'm just curious, as you think about this change, if a school is implementing or moving to a bell-to-bell cell phone ban, what are some other steps besides that they should think about to meet the goals of the policy?
Well, I'll just, can I chime in?
Please, yes.
Oh, yeah. Just as I think I said before, we believe it's so important to look at the situation kind of holistically, comprehensively, and saying, yes, you do need some restrictions probably, but teaching kids, so having a requirement for teaching media literacy, for teaching digital wellness and self-regulation, that we believe should be part of the broader policy of devices in schools. So, it's a holistic approach, we think.
I'd like to add to the conversation too, if that's okay. We got out in New York State, we currently have a cell phone ban for students in schools that's become law. And it's interesting because a lot of times, we have yonder pouches and things like that. So students are putting they call them burner phones in these yonder pouches, and they still actually have their cell phones on them. And so it's really interesting. It has reduced the amount of time students are spending on their cell phones in class in particular, because they know they can get in trouble if it's not. But it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of having their cell phones on their person throughout the school day, which has been a really interesting balance. And a little bit of an unpopular approach that I've kind of had on this is, I think that we're also at a point where student engagement is like we're in competition essentially. I feel like sometimes with AI and with technology and cell phones. So what are we doing as in terms of our teaching methods as well? Because if we're going to be in competition for student attention, then what we're doing might need to shift a little bit. Standing at the front of the room and lecturing students might not be the best approach. How, are we taking more project-based approaches? Is the learning relevant to the students? Is it meaningful? Is it purposeful to the students? Because that's where we see a little bit more of that captured attention versus just saying, hey, let's just ban all of these things and get them out of the classrooms, when in reality, we also kind of need to focus on our teaching practices at the same time to get us to a point where we're now teaching relevant, purposeful things. Students have access to all kinds of information. They can Google answers to questions related to, history, for example, right? So how are we shifting our teaching practices at the same time, is I think is an important part of the conversation.
Yeah, really. Thank you for that, for sharing, Ryan. I appreciate it. It's and I see others in the chat saying the same thing. Well, we are at time, so we're going to wrap up for today. I know Amanda dropped into the chat a link to an evaluation. It's quick, but we'd really love to hear any feedback you have, any thoughts on kind of how this hit you, what are some things you're taking away, and then if you have any kind of follow-up or lingering questions that we might be able to address. I'm also sharing on the screen our contact information. This is on the Thriving Minds side. I know this is going to go quickly, but I'm going to flash up now. This is the Media Literacy Now and Boston Children's Digital Wellness Lab side. Just so you know, you will get a copy of the slides. So if you have any information or any questions or want to follow up with any of us directly, you will have access to all of our information there as well. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your engagement, your thoughtful comments on the case studies and the FAQs. And yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you have follow-up questions or want to talk more. We'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy the
Thank you,
rest of the day.
This was great. Thank you all.